Hey guys, welcome. Hat Tuesday, number 38. Hat Tuesday, number 38. Hopefully, you guys are all having a great week so far. I got my man Paul in the lobby. Let me bring Paul in.
Good
Paul, how you
afternoon,
doing,
Nick.
my
Hi, good to see you.
Likewise, likewise. That's a great lid.
We've got a bit of rain over here in the UK at the moment, and I thought I wanted to make something that would just cheer me up. And I took a leaf out of Robert's book and got actually got vintage ribbon
Yeah,
on the edge here and around the crown. And yeah, I'm just sort of pleased with the result. It's nice and comfortable. I mean, it's just a good all
yeah,
round
that's
hat. To be honest, it's a 180 weight, so it's a reasonably thick felt, but I think it will reflect the heat. But it'll be all right for an autumn hat as well, you know. But
yeah.
it's actually a 13 centimeter crown, so it's quite high, isn't it? But it doesn't look that high.
No, it looks really balanced. It looks right. The proportions look right.
Yeah, it's. I was quite surprised, and of course I've got a diamond up the top there. But
Yeah.
thank you for saying that. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Like I said, always great to see some of your new creations, and I guess it's a good little therapy, for when the weather's not cooperating. It's a little bit overcast here as well, so I don't know if we're going
Is
to
it?
get any rain, but it's definitely a little dreary.
Yeah, we just had thunder. Not 5 minutes ago, it was thundering and lightning and chucking down the rain. Anyway,
Yeah.
it's far brighter being on here with you. So good to
All
see you.
right. Thank you, my friend. Thank you. And I don't know who else will join us, but like I said, this doesn't have to be an extensive show. I just wanted it, it was a good topic. It's one that I've kind of opined on, in terms of for the folks that's kind of listened in and seen some of the past shows, I've opined a little bit, and I was kind of caught in kind of a middle ground here in terms of like, who do I want to kind of focus on? And I think Brad Bowers kind of set me in the right direction. So I will take the John Kavanaugh route. But before we even get to John Kavanaugh, I want to open it up to you, Paul, because I saw that, and you have talked about Nick Fouquet here before, but a lot of interesting, good info there. Nathan, how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, I picked up on the subject, Luke, and I had a few moments to spare, and I thought, well,
Yeah,
I've spoken about Nick over the time we've been doing the show, and there are lots of other people that have actually influenced me, especially people as yeah, thanks,
yeah,
especially as people at Lock and Co. and the traditionalists, if you like,
yeah,
and I started to think about people like we've got Marcel Rodriguez, we've got Paul Ventris. We've got what's his name? Anyway, there's another gentleman that I know, but they've all taken the route of how can we look at the hat market and how can we actually reinvigorate it and
right.
get young people interested in wearing hats again. And I thought, well, I can go down the technical route and I can do a piece on Lock and Co. But people have heard about Lock and Co. and what they do, and they've been established for such a long time. So Nick Fouquet was an interesting story because, of course, his parents were from the fashion world. I think his father was a model. Not sure about his mother, but I think she was in the fashion world somewhere.
Yeah,
And Nick grew up between California and France, and obviously the sort of fashion flair and the community rubbed off on him. And
yeah,
just think that what he's done is, I mean, I've had, I think, 2 or 3 of his hats, okay, that have passed through my hands, and let me put it out there that I've seen better made hats, okay,
yeah,
that and I'm sure he would probably say the same as mine, because we're all on a journey. The latest hats that you make are probably the better hats than the ones that you made, a year, 2, 3 years ago, whatever.
yeah,
So in my case, I know that's the case because you've got better materials. You know what stiffness you need. You know what size brim to cut. All these things that you've learned all through that time, and how to shape the brim and the crown, and then the brim, and all of those things. Well, and I'm sure Nick has improved through time, and I think he's got about 15 people working for him now. But what I admired most about Nick was that he's looked at the Western style, he's looked at the festival style, he's looked at fashion, and he's put something together that clearly is attractive to people because he's built
yeah,
up a multi-million-dollar business out of it. Now, it's not you know, not tens of millions, but it's certainly in the single millions. And not only that, he's then looked at this lifestyle and he's reflected that in his marketing. So what he's done is he's done the same as the perfume houses do and the fashion couture houses. They actually come up with a lifestyle that people aspire to. It's a bit like we did a lot of this. I used to run a part of American Express many years ago, and that's what we were doing, was creating an image, a thing that people wanted to aspire to, an exclusive club, if you like. And when they got there, you know, they felt special. I think that's probably the same as Nick. He's done a rounded job. You know, he's created a very nice shop from the pictures and images that I've seen. He takes some great fashion shots and gets some good models, male and female. He's invested heavily in equipment. So, you know, we on the one hand, you can look at hatters and admire them for their quality of work, and I get that. And there are many people on here that will look at that, and that will be their heroes, if you like.
Yeah.
For me, the angle I wanted to take was that we have to get the youngsters interested in hats and in making hats. And so, where are they going to draw their interest, their inspiration? And they're not going to aspire to want to be like, you know, an older hatter like myself. They're going to want to aspire to be somebody who's a fashion trend maker, and that they could be considered as an influencer. And I think that's what Nick Fouquet is. He's a hat influencer that has created a range of hats, has now gone into Western accessories with belts and boots and jeans and so on. And he's charging an absolute fortune for them, because what it appears is that they're hand finished. Basically, they're jeans that have got embroidery on them and so on. And you know, and I get that. And there's a lot of work that goes into that. Having, you know, years ago I did that to my own jeans and clothes, but it's clearly got an appeal. And whether that is right or wrong, in my opinion, if it's extending the appeal of wearing hats, making hats, and it gives us other hatters, certainly myself, it has an influence on the style and how I dress up a hat, then that's okay. But I think we take our influence from many sources, and I think, you know, I just picked Nick out because I thought he meant quite a lot to me in terms of that respect. And you've got to admire somebody that's come into the market, you know, back I don't know, about 15 years ago, I guess now, and try to open it up. No doubt has put his savings on the line and has invested in traveling around the world, teaching people, supporting people. Now, I've never sat down with a gentleman and known what his skills are like in making a hat. I've seen his videos, and you know, it's probably you know, he's got all the equipment, he's got all of the sweatband sewing machines, all the things that you'd expect and like. So I'm pretty sure that his hats that are coming out right now are good. Now, whether they are worth $1,500 to $2,000 and upwards, that's another debate probably. But certainly the way I feel is that he's taken an unconventional route to a traditional market, appealing to a younger age where traditionally older gentlemen have worn hats, and he's crossed that boundary between the traditional working man's hat of a cowboy stroke Western individual and the high street fashion, in terms of, you know, people going to nightclubs and things. They'll now be seen in a festival style hat that's got a you know, influence from various sources, and Nick's put it together, and all of a sudden it becomes high fashion in hatwear, and they're seen in the clubs in and around California, no doubt. I think in addition to that, what he's done, he's built a brand. Now, you know, the brand value that he's built up, if he were to sell his business tomorrow, he would probably get a good dollar for it. Whereas us as small hatters, you know, we have to have a whole plethora of things with the things like, you know, the website, you got your YouTube channel, you've got to have all the equipment, you've got to have all the right ability to make, you've got to even down to trademarking your brand, creating your image and following it through, not just with the design of your name and your brand, but actually with the lifestyle, videos and productions that you put together, and he's done that very well. You know, he's built that up, and he's also using premium products. You know, I think he's using, from what I've seen, very, very soft sweatbands, which I think are probably Rowan or sheepskin. And then he's using beaver fur felt. Now, you know, we all accept that beaver fur felt is the standard as being a very high quality felt. So I'm not sure where he buys that from, mind you. I don't know whether it's FEPSA or whether it's you know, somebody in America. Probably somebody in America, but I don't know. And then he's adorned the hats with a number of really high quality accessories. Perhaps not as much as, is it Zoto or Zito? Zitco. They seem to put these little cushions or something, what they call them. They make the actual jewelry that they then put on the hat bands, which I absolutely adore. I think that's great. And having the ability to do that as well is another skill set that that they've learned, which I think is tremendous, really, because it's taken the hats that they make an even further distance forward. And I guess what he's done is he's managed to gain recognition, and from what I found out, he has been admitted to the Council of Fashion Designers of America. Now, as I understand it, that seems to be quite a prestigious thing to be a member of, and no doubt they feel that he's earned that position, and that's also quite something. I mean, if you look at the clientele base that he's got, it's very supported by the people that are actors and actresses, that are musicians and so on. So, you know, he's obviously in the right location, and actually appealing to the right people. So I think in addition to that, he's been very savvy in terms of identifying other businesses that he'd like to partner with, because then he can leverage their brand association and also their customer base. So I know I had one which was a Nick Fouquet Borsellino hat, or a Borsellino Nick Fouquet hat, and of course there, you know, Borsellino has a great following worldwide for years and years, far greater than Nick Fouquet, I'm sure. But they clearly identified that it would do them and their brand good by associating with Nick and putting a small collection together. I think that's a pretty good thing to acknowledge. So you know, in summary, it's interesting to see how he's created not only a hat brand but a lifestyle brand, and how he has extended that into a communication strategy through his marketing, through his appeal, through his website, through his the use of his signature and his brand, and it's just amazing what he's done, I think. And and it comes back to, is the hat the thing, or is it the brand that's the thing? And for Nick Fouquet, I don't think it's the quality of the hat. I think it's the whole package of the brand and the lifestyle that people are buying into. So I don't think I've identified the best hatter who is my hero, but I've identified somebody that I believe has made a big influence on the marketplace, both in America and in Europe, or at least in the UK.
Yeah, that's a great you know, summary, because my perception, again, I came across Nick Fouquet's name in passing, but mostly through you, Paul. And in my perception is that he does a great job of kind of straddling that kind of you know, that festival hat as well as the traditional fedora style. And, you know, obviously, you know, is at the upper end of the market in terms of pricing. But again, you know, if that's where he chose to target, and it makes sense, right? I mean, if you're able to do that and become, you know, and have that kind of a clientele, then more power to you. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of see that, you know, that take, and see somebody go into that, you know, kind of late, right? So these are folks that started kind of you know, after the heyday, right? So it's like, all right, the market's saying it's like people aren't wearing hats anymore, and to find folks that are successful, you know, in this time period, that's very notable.
Yeah, it's very difficult to take what is thanks, Nathan. It's very difficult to take what is a relatively small marketplace, turn it into something that's handmade, and make money to be able to live off of it. Okay, and I have all admiration for anybody that's done that. But I think that what I'm seeing in the UK, people like Marcel Rodriguez is a gentleman that I haven't met actually. I've linked up on LinkedIn, and I plan to go down and see him sometime. But he, from what I gather, he worked in Savile Row, which is a street in the UK which is known for clothing and hatting and so on. And then he decided to take his family into a better lifestyle down into what we call the West Country, which is very much beach life and leisure focus. So a real nice lifestyle, and create a business around it. And he was obviously very good at making hats. So he opened up a shop making hats and making fashion garments. And again, very similar to what Nick has done in America, he's doing in the UK. Got every admiration. It's a very sort of bohemian type look, if you like, rather than following Nick or following anybody else. He's really a man of his own design. But you know, you've got to admire somebody that's put their savings into something such as that, and then works their socks off to make it pay.
Yeah, indeed. You know, so shout out to Nick Fouquet and to all the folks, you know, and yourself included, Paul. We got some shout outs here. You know, it's very notable again to see those opportunities in the current marketplace, and then be able to find some success. So yeah, shout out to Nick Fouquet, shout out to you, Paul, and all the other hatters that are out there making it happen. You know. Yeah, that's fantastic. So for me, I was going to choose to concentrate on John Kavanagh. You know, and I've talked about this a lot more extensively in past videos. But I think that the thing with John Kavanagh is, you know, we talked a lot about the power of branding, and he was somebody that I guess recognized, besides building his own brand, his Kavanagh brand, which was a very, you know, high status brand that he built. He was also a collector of brands, you know. Ultimately that culminated. So this, he was born in Connecticut, you know, and interestingly, you know, a lot of his connection was to New York City, not Connecticut. You would think Danbury, Connecticut, which is known in Hat City. I would expect him to have set up shop there, but he was born in Norwalk, Connecticut. Started off, you know, working at the age of 17 in hatting. Worked for William A. Brown Hatters in Norwalk at the age of 17. He worked as a sizer, as a trimmer, as a finisher, an expert cutter, a curler, and a plant superintendent. So you can see he kind of worked his way up. So he kind of knew the business from the ground up. You know, and at some point he got a job working for Crowfoot and Knapp. And he was actually mentored by James H. Knapp himself. You know, by 1907, you know, he was already the vice president of Crowfoot and Knapp. And at that point, that's in 1928 is when he started off Kavanagh and Dobbs, which merged Kavanagh hats with Dobbs. And now you're already seeing the connection of the branding there, right? So Dobbs obviously is a very recognizable name. And that was kind of the genesis of where we got to eventually Hat Corporation of America in 1932. And just to kind of give you a sense, we're talking about Dobbs, Kavanagh, Crowfoot and Knapp, Dunlap, and Knox. So they had other brands as well, but we're talking about like a powerhouse here. And many folks consider like the 1930s to the 1950s to be kind of like the heyday, right? The golden period. So Hat Corporation of America was pretty much right in the crux of it in that golden period of hats, right? You know, and ultimately we saw the decline, you know, that happened obviously in the 60s and ultimately through the 70s. You know, I think 1970 was kind of when HCA kind of shuttered. But you know, the Kavanagh edge, you know, was and still is kind of a manufacturing marvel, like that edge where it appears seamless. And as far as I'm aware, nobody has reproduced this, which is still boggles my mind that somebody has not like found an example and either couldn't figure it out. And it's probably not that. It's probably they could figure it. They're like, this is not worth it to kind of reproduce this for whatever reason. I don't know the ins and outs. But it's neat that it's kind of a detail that you just wouldn't find. And I think that's unique, right? Because you're like, at some point by this time, everything has kind of already been done, and pretty much what's left there to innovate, and I know that's probably that's not as optimistic as you probably would want, but you kind of get that thinking sometimes. You're like, wow, what is there left to do with these hats? So it's just neat that Kavanaugh edge is still a legacy that still survives to today, and it's something that separates that line of hats out from anything else that you would find. I own a couple examples of Kavanaugh hats. They're definitely great manufactured hats. But it's one of those things where, for me, the idea of seeing the power of branding, we've talked about that together, Paul, about the power of brands. And it's something that John J. Kavanaugh definitely recognized and implemented in his business strategy. In 1939, he won an award, a Neiman Marcus Fashion Award, in recognition for his services to the American hat industry. He was also heavily involved in politics, right? So we've talked about this on the show, at least I have, about that when Kennedy was being inaugurated, he wore a Kavanaugh top hat. Now, this was actually already passed when John J. Kavanaugh, right after he passed away, but there was still that connection to the corporation. Remember, HCA was big hat at the time, so there was a lot of pull in the industry. Thank you, Nathan. I appreciate it. So you can see that Kennedy was reluctant to wear, but he kind of, because he was friends with he had these industry friends, he still felt that pressure to do that. So even though he didn't always wear the hat, he would have the hat in hand, and there's photos of Kennedy doing that. And I just think that's neat right there, when you're seeing like an industry still kind of, it's on the decline, but it's still kind of a very powerful industry, having its effect in politics. So, in summary, like, the Hat Corporation of America was a pivotal merger in the American hat industry, combining a lot of New York's best hat brands together. It still remains like a symbol of craftsmanship and innovation. And the brands still exist today. I think they're technically owned by, a lot of them are owned either by Stetson or Resistol and are held by Hatco. So they're based in Texas. So you still see the brands. I don't know. I couldn't opine about the quality. A lot of the examples that I have are of the vintage variety. But it's just neat that these brands still exist in one way or another. And it's one of the, John J. Kavanaugh definitely is part of like that hat Mount Rushmore, that Mount Rushmore of hatters that I had talked about, that along with like Ezra Mallory and John B. Stetson. But, for Brad said he wished he could be here to talk a little bit more about Kavanaugh. He definitely is a lot more of an expert. A lot of the information I've gotten, about hats in general, has come from Brad's website. So it's just neat to kind of recognize some of these figures. And it's one of those things where I'm like, we can still continue doing that in future shows to kind of bring in any folks that, that you feel are very influential. Again, doesn't have to be somebody that's in the past. It could be somebody, that's currently influencing the hat landscape. And we try to celebrate that stuff because, they're inspiring other folks, and then we go always see Paul inspiring some kudos there. And a lot of these stories are really good at getting other folks inspired to be able to do and leave their mark.
I think what would be good is to see some new hatters, like Zitko and some of the others in America, actually be taken under the wing of Hatco and maybe a partnership to produce a particular collection. Because if you think about the brands with Kavanaugh, so much history, great stories and information you gave there, Luke. Thank you. And I think I've got one or two Kavanaughs somewhere around, and I admire the quality of these older hats, but a great deal, and they're beautiful felts to work with. But moving forward, if we're going to preserve those brands and names, then what are they doing to appeal to the new generation of hat wearers.
Right.
And just maybe, if what we're seeing are, the few people like, whether it's myself or whether it's Nick Fouquet and whether it's others that are companies that have 3 to 10 employees, let's say, they've got a brand presence in their geographical area and send and make for international as well, perhaps. But they're relatively small. They're under £1 million turnover. They are they're putting their own money into it and so on. But if somebody like Hatco came along and actually mentored them, supported them, put a collection together with them, I can't help thinking how much further that would bring the traditional brands into the forefront again to a different audience, and the new brands to a wider audience, because of the ability that money and machinery and distribution actually brings to the opportunity.
And that's a sentiment that kind of seems to be echoed here with Nathan, who says the next hat hero will be someone who can attach themselves to new and upcoming celebrities and social influencers. And we talked about folks like Johnny Depp, and so that we have Pharrell Williams that we talked about in terms of Nick Fouquet, folks like that can kind of put the brand out there, because we have brands like, a lot of folks seem to know Stetson, Mallory, maybe not as much, but if you have those brands that are still in existence and you can get a celebrity to kind of talk about them and get them to an audience that will otherwise, unless they decided to go full on in, wouldn't otherwise hear about them, it'll spark that curiosity, and it's up to also the brands, the current owners of these brands, to be able to establish those connections. Because again, we mentioned this before, I'm like, the idea that, or the fact that Borsellino and Johnny Depp haven't gotten together and come up with something, is just mind-boggling to me, because it just seems like such an easy win.
It may have something more to do with the business side of it, in so much as if you think about Johnny Depp particular is the face of Eau Sauvage, I think it is, for Dior, and the amount of money that they must be paying him to support their brand, and the hat industry just doesn't have that funding ability. And when you're limited in terms of your time, because in his case he might want to go off and do his music, or he might be preparing for a new film. He's got limited time to put into these ventures. So I sort of get it, but it's such a shame, because what we really need is somebody that is perhaps on the way up. I'm actually working with a guy who's won the Country Music Awards in the UK, and I've just sponsored him to put together a range of hats for his next season, if you like. So that would be interesting to see how that pans out.
No, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
I agree. I agree. Somebody on the way up, and again, is willing to, in terms of becoming an ambassador for the brand, in whatever capacity that would be, right? Obviously, wearing the hat in public, and if it's something that somebody's going to ask about questions, I just feel that a lot of folks that do these interviews, they're inquisitive folks. They're like, hey, that's a great hat. What? Tell me about it. That might be all that's needed.
I agree.
We got Nathan saying that's great news. Yeah, it's awesome. Like I said, Paul's doing some great stuff, and it's great that he's recognized. I see Paul's a man after my own heart. He knows the power of brands, and he has these ideas that and he's actually implementing a lot of them. So it's one of those things where I'm like, it's a fun thing to watch.
Do you know what, Luke? It's as much the fun of doing it and actually feeling that there'll be people out there that will see the work. If I make it, the guy's name's Rob Wheeler. He's done well on the music front, if he goes to each show with a different hat on and after show events and so on, then it's great exposure. I'm not necessarily looking for any work from it, but it's just nice to work with somebody that appreciates it and will actually use it as a working tool within his craft.
That's shout out to the musicians, and we've covered some some of those as well. The musicians are a big part, and it's one of those things every once in a while when I go out with a hat on, somebody will make a comment like, "Do you play music?" There is that connotation. It kind of goes with that profession. It feels like so it makes sense. You know, somebody in the music realm. It just seems like a perfect match. Yeah, Paul, you have to keep us up to date on how that progresses.
We'll do. I'll put the collection together, and then we can have a look and chat it through.
Yeah, and I don't know if but Cold Bones Lullabies. I always remember Cold Bones Lullabies. He's an early subscriber.
Yeah,
great musician. I know he's a customer of Paul's. You know, shout out to you. You know, keep up the good music. I'm keeping up on Facebook. So that's all I had, Paul. I mean, in terms of the hat heroes, this is a fun topic. I mean, I feel like we can go in a lot of different ways. You know, I kept it at hat making, but obviously there's folks that are hat wearers that are also heroes as well. So maybe, you know, we'll continue on that route, either in piecemeal or dedicated topic. But Paul, I appreciate you coming on and sharing, you know, the research on Nick Fouquet. And shout out to Nick, who's still active and doing it. And, you know, I hope you guys enjoyed today's show. It was a short one, but I thought it was a good one. And I'm going to say, keep supporting folks like Paul, Robert, you know, Josh, and all the other good folks on the Good Luke's Network. Keep supporting the folks outside the Good Luke's Network, right? And even if you don't support, right, you know, even if you choose not to support these good folks, the one thing you got to do is you got to stay hatting, my friend. Have a great day. Ciao, everybody.